Vivian, on the other hand, much as she loved playing Scarlet, much as she wanted to play Scarlet, had a slightly different point of view. She wanted the film to be completed as soon as it could be completed. And the reason was that she was deeply, deeply in love with Larry Olivier, who was playing in a very successful play on Broadway with Catherine Cornell, No Time for Comedy. This meant that for most of the shooting of Gone with the Wind, Vivian and Larry were separated, and the play was going on. Therefore, she hoped to bring about the completion of Gone with the Wind as soon as it was possible, and she made the most extraordinary sacrifice of health and energy and strength to bring that about. Instead of working just to 6 o'clock, as most of us did, she would work to 7. Then she would break for dinner and she would come back to the set and she would work perhaps up until midnight in order to bring about the completion of the film just that much sooner so she could be with Larry that much more quickly. During the very last weeks of Gone with the Wind, there were none of my scenes scheduled. But I learned that toward the end of June, what would be Vivian's last shooting date. And so I went to the studio and to the set to wish her farewell and Godspeed. I passed her on the set. She was wearing the faded mauve cotton dress that Scarlett wears at Tara during the most difficult years of the war between the states. And I didn't recognize Vivian. She'd lost so much weight. Her strength seemed to have been so profoundly depleted. But the next day, she was certainly strong enough to get on that plane and make her flight toward New York City in reunion with Larry. And so the filming of Gone with the Wind came to an end. Months later, the premiere of Gone with the Wind was scheduled. The date chosen was December 15th, 1939, and the place was Atlanta, Georgia, the theater, Lowe's Theater. This was an immensely daring choice for David Selznick, because he would be presenting this film about the South, about the war between the states, about Atlantans, to them. Their war, their struggles, their story. Would they accept us? Would they accept the film? It was a tremendously suspenseful occasion. Well, Jack Warner said I couldn't go to the premiere. And I thought, well, I am going to the premiere. And I did go to the premiere.
As distinguished visitors arrived, headed by producer David Selznick and screen stars Olivia de Havilland and Vivian Leigh.
Now, the opening, the premiere, was a most festive, gala, and elegant occasion. All the men wore white tie and tails. All the ladies, not only long evening dresses, but long gloves as well. Well, we arrived at the theater. Jock Whitney and I took our seats. I sat to his right. To his left was Margaret Mitchell, and to her left was her husband, John Marsh. Well, the great moment came when the lights dimmed and Gone with the Wind flashed upon the screen. The audience was spellbound. Spellbound. Absolute silence reigned until the scene, the great panoramic scene at the Atlanta depot, where we see laid on stretchers, row upon row upon row of wounded Confederate soldiers. And I heard John Marsh say to Margaret Mitchell, "Why, if we'd had that many soldiers, we'd have won the war." Finally, the film came to an end, and the lights went up, and not a sound could be heard. Nobody moved. Nobody said anything. And then, all of a sudden, as one, the whole audience rose and began to clap and clap and clap and clap and clap. And then we knew that Gone with the Wind was a success and would have a long and happy life. In 1961, David and Vivian and I kept a final rendezvous in Atlanta, the city where our story began. Gone with the Wind was to be premiered yet again in honor of the centennial of the commencement of the war between the states. But this time, Margaret Mitchell was gone. Clark Gable was gone. Leslie was gone. Hattie McDaniel was gone. And then the film flashed upon the screen, and there they were, in all their vibrant life, in joyful reunion, and we were together again. We never imagined in 1939 that our film, Gone with the Wind, would endure decade after decade after decade. But it has, and it will no doubt endure for many, many decades to come.
Gone with the Wind contains many exciting and spectacular sequences, but it is actually a story about people who lived, loved, and fought to find the courage to survive. It is perhaps for this reason that in spite of the passing decades, Gone with the Wind has maintained a vitality and a freshness that makes it as relevant today as it was the first time Scarlett and Rhett, Ashley and Melanie, and a civilization gone with the wind first came to life on the silver screen. Thomas Mitchell, the film's Gerald O'Hara, was one of the most popular character actors of his day and became one of the few who ever won an Oscar, an Emmy, and a Tony Award. Initially, Mitchell had refused to go into films, preferring to remain on Broadway, where he was a leading star. It was not until 1936 that he finally agreed, signing a long-term contract with Columbia Pictures. In 1937, he earned his first Academy Award nomination playing an alcoholic doctor in The Hurricane, directed by John Ford. The following year, Ford cast Mitchell as yet another alcoholic doctor, this time in his legendary western, Stagecoach.
Your health, Reverend. He's a whiskey drummer.
What?
In 1939, after only 3 years in Hollywood, Mitchell was to reach the peak of his success appearing in 5 of the year's biggest films. In addition to Gone with the Wind and Stagecoach, Mitchell also had important roles in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Only Angels Have Wings, and in The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Who's the king here?
Mitchell's win of the Best Supporting Actor Oscar for that year for Stagecoach could have just as easily been for any of the others. Throughout the 40s, Mitchell continued to work steadily in films, and in 1945 he reunited with Clark Gable and Victor Fleming for Adventure.
I'm gonna miss you, Harry. Never to see your face again.
That's fine, Mudge. Let's get aboard. We're sailing.
Oh, I'm sailing?
In 1946, the same year he starred with Olivia de Havilland in The Dark Mirror, Mitchell was to play what was to become one of his most famous roles, that of Uncle Billy in Frank Capra's It's a Wonderful Life. At the end of the 40s, Mitchell returned to stage work, replacing Lee J. Cobb in Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman, and winning a Tony Award for his performance in the musical Hazel Flag. While in New York, Mitchell also began working regularly on live television and was honored with an Emmy Award for Best Television Actor of 1952. Even after being diagnosed with the cancer that would eventually take his life, Mitchell continued to work nearly non-stop all the way up to his death in 1962.
On Christmas Eve, many years ago, I lay quietly in my bed. I did not rustle the sheets. I breathed slowly and silently. I was listening for a sound I was afraid I'd never hear. Well, you coming?
Where?
Why, to the North Pole, of course. This is the Polar Express! All aboard!
Scarlett O'Hara's mother, Ellen, was played by the beautiful Barbara O'Neill, who was but a mere 4 years older than her screen daughter, Vivien Leigh. A successful stage actress before coming to Hollywood in 1937, Barbara scored her finest post-Gone with the Wind role in 1940's All This and Heaven Too.
And I'll tell you something. something more. No letter will I ever write, except one that will prevent her doing to another woman what she's done to me. No matter where she goes, if she goes to the ends of the earth, my hatred will follow her. Teo. Teo! No! No, Teo! Teo, have mercy! Have mercy! Teo! Teo! Teo!
Her performance earning her an Academy Award nomination as Best Supporting Actress. In spite of her success in films, however, Barbara chose to return to the stage, where she would remain a popular player for the rest of her career. She passed away at the age of 70 on September the 3rd, 1980. Lovely blonde Evelyn Keyes, who will always be remembered as Scarlett O'Hara's younger sister Sue Ellen, had spent most of her youth in the heart of the Deep South in Atlanta, Georgia. In the mid-1930s, she came to Hollywood, where she was put under personal contract to director-producer Cecil B. DeMille, who began grooming her for stardom, which she would attain while under contract to Columbia Pictures in the 1940s. It was for that studio that she made some of her most memorable films. Like her Gone with the Wind sister, Anne Rutherford, Evelyn Keyes decided to retire young and pursue other interests. On occasion, however, she would return to acting on stage, television, and in the movies. In her later years, she found a new career as a best-selling author. Although Gone with the Wind would be her most famous film, most audiences remember Anne Rutherford as girl next door Polly Benedict in the popular Andy Hardy series for MGM in the 1930s and 40s.
Andy!
The Canadian-born Rutherford began her career on the radio in Los Angeles before moving into pictures in 1935. The first time she became Polly Benedict was in 1938's You're Only Young Once. 11 other Andy Hardy films followed, including Love Finds Andy Hardy Gets Spring Fever, and Life Begins for Andy Hardy. On December the 26th, 1942, Anne married for the first time and continued to appear in films. One particular performance was in The Secret Life of Walter Mitty with Danny Kaye in 1947. In 1953, after divorcing her first husband, Anne married producer William Dozier, and with this marriage, she settled into a happy retirement. Hattie McDaniel's brilliant performance as Mammy made her the most famous and honored African-American actress of her day. But it also put her in the very center of the controversy over racial stereotypes in the movies. Hattie's big break in motion pictures came in 1934 when she was cast in an important role in Judge Priest. The film, directed by John Ford, was a major success, and Hattie was highly praised for her performance. Hattie's success in Judge Priest led to more roles and more money, but she soon found herself being criticized for playing roles that were considered demeaning to the growing civil rights movement. She grew tired of the attacks and responded angrily, "When you ask me not to play the parts, what have you got to offer in return?" The attacks, however, would only grow louder in the following years. In 1935, George Stevens cast her as the highly independent maid in Alice Adams opposite Katharine Hepburn.
Dennis,
Other such roles followed, and her back-talking, sometimes bossy servant became something of a Hattie trademark. Although this type of role was a step in the right direction, it surprisingly brought criticism from some white audiences who found Hattie too sassy for their tastes. The overwhelming success of Gone with the Wind elevated Hattie to a level never before achieved by an African-American performer. David O. Selznick, however, who now had Hattie under exclusive contract, seemed to have trouble knowing just what to do with her. Over the next few years, Selznick loaned Hattie's services out to other studios, where she appeared in a number of films, including In This Our Life, with Olivia de Havilland.
Now, you just like your grandma, Mrs. Timberlake.
Only I'm not so pretty.
No.
But none equaled her great success in Gone with the Wind.
I think it's humiliating the way you're treating Mr. Kennedy.
You'd be a sight more humiliated if Mr. Kennedy's lice gets on you.
In 1947, Hattie made radio history by starring in her own series for CBS, The Beulah Show. By the end of 1948, the show was one of the most popular on radio, with an audience of 15 million listeners. By 1951, The Beulah Show was so popular that there were both television and radio versions running at the same time. Hattie had only completed 6 of the television episodes when she was suddenly stricken by illness, which later was found to be cancer. She insisted her illness be kept secret from the public and was taken to the motion picture country house in Woodland Hills, where she remained until October the 26th, 1952, when she died at age 57. Oscar Polk, who played the loyal servant Pork in Gone with the Wind, was born not in the South, but in the Southwest, in Marianna, Arizona, around 1900. Polk had a 20-year career as a performer, working with equal grace on stage and screen. One of his most notable roles was the Angel Gabriel in both the stage and film versions of The Green Pastures.
Gangway for the Lord God Jehovah.
In 1943, Polk appeared in Cabin in the Sky, which included fellow Gone with the Wind cast members Eddie Anderson and Butterfly McQueen. It was his last major role, and he passed away on January the 4th, 1949. Representing the complete opposite of Hattie McDaniel's strong-willed Mammy was the shrill-voiced and timid Prissy, played with equal brilliance by actress Butterfly McQueen.
The Yankees is here! Please come and bring your carrots for us right away!
Miss McQueen began her career as a dancer in New York in the 1930s, and it was during this period that she became known as Butterfly. Having always hated her birth name of Thelma, she adopted her new name after dancing in the Butterfly Ballet sequence of a 1935 production of A Midsummer Night's Dream. She had come to the attention of producer David O. Selznick after he had seen her in George Abbott's hit comedy What a Life. After her scene-stealing performance in Gone with the Wind, Butterfly worked in a number of other films, including The Women in 1939, the all-black musical extravaganza Cabin in the Sky, and Mildred Pierce.
You go down to that restaurant and work.
Keeps me thin.
Beg pardon? Don't do nothing for me.
Her finest performance, after Gone with the Wind, was in another David O. Selznick production, Duel in the Sun, in 1946, where she played the mysterious Vashti. The well-intentioned battle against racial stereotypes in the movies put many talented performers out of work. Butterfly McQueen was one of those who found it nearly impossible to find work in movies or television for fear that her mere appearance might bring charges of racism. She lived long enough to see her career revived in her later years. Her last film performance was opposite Harrison Ford and Helen Mirren in Peter Weir's 1986 motion picture, The Mosquito Coast. Butterfly McQueen died at the age of 84 in 1995. Although the role was to be one of his most memorable, British matinee idol Leslie Howard originally wanted nothing to do with Ashley Wilkes in Gone with the Wind, believing himself too old and the character too weak. But David O. Selznick knew these concerns could be overcome with a combination of careful makeup and Howard's considerable talent and charm. He had been born Leslie Howard Stainer in London on April 3, 1893. It was going to be a career in banking, But after being wounded in World War I, Howard reconsidered his plans, deciding to give acting a try. His timing could not have been better. With most young men still away at war, handsome young Howard easily found work as a leading man for several touring companies. The touring productions provided an excellent training ground, and by the time he returned to London, he was a seasoned veteran. Other roles quickly followed, and by war's end, Howard was considered a hot commodity on the London stage. In 1920, he left for America to appear on Broadway in the comedy Just Suppose. The play was a major success and brought Howard instant recognition. Over the next years, he became a leading figure on the Broadway stage, appearing in a series of successes, including the supernatural drama Outward Bound with Alfred Lunt. In 1930, Howard made his American motion picture debut when Warner Brothers asked him to repeat his original role as the alcoholic Tom Pryor in their big-budget production of Outward Bound.
You'll get to know me quite well, so I thought I'd just warn you to begin with.
The following year, he made 3 pictures for MGM, including A Free Soul, which brought him together with Clark Gable, then in his first year of stardom.
Well, can I drop you somewhere? No, thanks.
For the rest of his life, Howard would be one of the few stars who could move with equal success between stage and screen. Often these worlds would come together, with Howard repeating a stage role for the film version, as he did in 1933 with Berkeley Square, for which he would receive his first Academy Award nomination. In 1934, Howard was set to star in the RKO production of W. Somerset Maugham's tragic novel of human bondage. Playing the sluttish waitress Millicent Rogers opposite Howard was a relatively unknown actress on loan from Warner Brothers, Betty Davis.
If you don't come out with me tonight, you'll never see me again.
Good riddance to bad rubbish.
Upon its release, the hugely successful film made a star out of Davis and added to Howard's already impressive popularity. Davis and Howard were to work again when Warner Brothers produced a film version of Robert Sherwood's gripping drama, The Petrified Forest.
What are you looking for?
I suppose I was looking for something to believe in, worth living for and dying for.
The play, which won raves from the critics, became a sensation. One of the key elements to its success was the intense performance by the relatively unknown Humphrey Bogart as gangster Duke Mantee.
Well, so we meet again. Sit down, pal.
It was Howard who insisted, in spite of studio objections, that Bogart be brought on to repeat his role. Bogart would never forget this kindness, and years later he remembered Howard's selfless act by naming his daughter Leslie Howard Bogart. In 1936, Howard was at the very peak of his career as a romantic leading man, and at age 43 he was asked to play Romeo in MGM's production of Romeo and Juliet. Although he was later praised for his performance, Howard initially refused the role, believing he was far too old to play the teenage lover.
Here's to my love.
The following year, Howard spoofed his Romeo in the hit comedy It's Love I'm After, opposite Betty Davis and Olivia de Havilland. One of Howard's most famous roles came when he played Professor Henry Higgins in the 1938 British production of George Bernard Shaw's Pygmalion for producer Gabriel Pascal. The film, which Howard also co-directed, was a tremendous hit in both England and America and earned him a second Oscar nomination. After the pleasurable experience of co-directing Pygmalion, Howard looked for new opportunities to branch out beyond acting. Producer David O. Selznick used this desire to induce him to play Ashley Wilkes in Gone with the Wind, by allowing him to associate produce as well as star in Intermezzo, which, by the way, would mark Ingrid Bergman's American film debut. By the time he had completed Gone with the Wind and Intermezzo, war had broken out once again across Europe. Giving no further thought to his film career, Howard rushed back to England to do whatever he could for the British war effort. The government took advantage of his enormous popularity by sending him out on tours to promote the British cause. It was on one of these trips that Leslie Howard lost his life. On June the 1st, 1943, Howard was traveling by commercial airline from Lisbon, Portugal, back to London, when his plane was attacked and shot down over the Bay of Biscay. He was 50 years old. Born on September the 21st, 1918, as Arlington Rand Brooks Jr. and raised in Beverly Hills, Rand originally studied to become a teacher before realizing he could possibly make a lot more